So good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining us on this webinar today. It's bright and early. We've got everybody on the call and we'll do some introductions shortly. But thank you very much for joining us. It's very evident that the discussion around business continuity is an important one, and it's one that a lot of people are still trying to figure out within their respective companies. So today will be a very open discussion with some business leaders to understand a bit more about what's going through their minds, what they can divulge in terms of what's going on with their industry and how their business is being impacted. I'm Mervyn George, and with my colleague Colin Banks, I'm part of a team focused around looking at innovation strategy. I like to think of it as the business side of innovation, where the discussions are technology agnostic, like this type of session. And Colin, perhaps you can provide a quick intro as well.
Mervyn. Yes, Colin Banks. I'm part of the digital organization within SAP, where Mervyn talks around strategy and innovation within the business. I talk around the execution thereof and how we can introduce that into a customer's business to get them working in that innovation.
Good, thank you. Let's explain what this Innovation Roundtable series is about. In October, Colin and I thought it would be good to start having some important discussions with people and typically sought to meet an atypical SAP audience. So we reached out to a general public and we got some engagement or interest from startup founders, from large enterprise executives, from management consultants, from people who are familiar with the SAP world and also not familiar. And we launched a series of discussions. And as I mentioned earlier, the focus between us is to look at technology agnostic and then also technology centric discussions. So some of the technology centric discussions that we've had previously include looking at 5G and the future of artificial intelligence, looking at the impact of cognitive robotic process automation. And then we had an interesting discussion, or should I call it a debate, around how to measure innovation success, and also looked at enterprise adoption of blockchain, moving away from financial services and focusing more on the consumer goods or consumer industries areas. So that's what we've done today. Today's session, we're talking about business continuity in South Africa, given the pandemic and the lockdown. And in a future session, we are planning to do the same thing in East Africa. And then we are busy finalizing the structure for an ideation workshop to look at how we can rebuild South Africa and what role technology providers and other stakeholders should have in that type of movement. And then we're also going to focus on future of work readiness. So if you're interested in some of these topics, definitely keep up to date with the comms that we'll send out, and you can by all means join those future sessions. I'd like to introduce the panelists for today. The first one is Trevor Harding. Trevor Harding is the group CIO for RCL Foods. I'll let Trevor offer an opening statement so he can tell us a bit more about himself and about the brand. And then we'll pose some questions to Trevor and to the rest of the panel. Second, we have Janine George, who is the Chief Product Officer at Carol Boys. And then we have Jaco Hatting, who is the General Manager at Barloworld Logistics. So we've got representation here from consumer goods and milling. We've got representation from retail and consumer products, and we've got representation from logistics and supply chain industry sectors. Okay, so just a reminder to everybody who might have joined late, if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A pop-up box. We'll be monitoring that more than the chat box for questions, so that we can direct them towards the panelists at a later stage. Okay, so with that, to the panel, thank you very much for being here. It's bright and early. I know you've got lots of things to focus on today and this week and generally during the lockdown. But Trevor, if I can hand over to you, if you can unmute and just share a little bit about the company that you work for, what your role is within the company. I know that you have dual roles that you fulfill as well. And just a little bit about what the impact has been for your business based on the pandemic and also based on the lockdown.
Hey, Mervyn, thank you for hosting this panel today. Yeah, from my side, I've been with RCL Foods, which some of you might remember previously was Rainbow Chicken. Since then, in the last 7 years or so, we've pretty much trebled in size through the acquisition of Food Corp, which included brands like Yum Yum Peanut Butter, Omar Russ, Nola Mayonnaise, all the Woolies food you buy, from cakes to muffins to a whole range of the breads. And we also acquired Salati Sugar, which that took place also a couple of years ago. So at the moment, we're primarily we are a foods company, about 28 billion turnover. We also have a 100% stake in Vector Logistics, which is very much in the frozen cold chain space. So we do the bulk of the country's frozen logistics. So obviously, in these current times, clearly it's almost business unusual, but nationally we're obviously very much part of the essential food chain. We also have a lot of products that are very much in the essential basket of the bulk of our population, in terms of things like chicken, bread, obviously maize meal. So there's a real role to be played, and it's been an exciting journey, and essentially we're operating nationally as if it's normal. But it's obviously very unnormal. But operations-wise, people are going to work every day. We've got 20,000 plus people. So obviously, wherever people could work remotely, they're working remotely. But unfortunately, with real operations on the ground, you've got to have people at the office or at the factories or distribution centers. So yeah, Mervyn, that's just a bit of background. We can perhaps pick up on other areas of what we're doing later. From my role, I'm Group CIO, but I also play the sort of group transformation lead on any sort of acquisitions in terms of the integration, implementation. I report directly to the CEO, so direct ownership into the exec and the board. Thanks.
Trevor, thank you very much. I definitely have a few questions based on what you've mentioned. So next in the lineup, we've got Janine George, Chief Product Officer at Carol Boys. Janine, if you could do a similar thing, just give us your, let's call it an opening statement. What's the impact been to your business? Let's first focus on what your business is about, what your role within the business is, what the impact has been to the business, to what extent it's operating as normal. And then, anything else you just want to open up with.
Sure. Thanks everybody. Thanks for listening. And welcome to my daughter's bedroom. And thanks, Mervyn, for giving me an opportunity to put on some makeup and actually get dressed, because I feel like all I've been doing over the last couple of weeks has gone from, I think I started off with makeup first week, second week realized I was running out of makeup, and apparently we've decided this wasn't an essential service. So it's really good to get up today and look a little bit more presentable. So Janine George, and work for Carol Boys, and official title is Chief Product Officer. Although with any small company, as a lot of people would understand, that usually is just a title. I oversee the product development and planning in the business, and also the online and digital side, which includes the marketing of our products online. Carol Boys, for those of you on the call that don't know, she was the founder of Carol Boys Limited in 1989. So we've been around for just over 30 years. And we design, develop, manufacture, and distribute home and lifestyle products, more for the top end market. We sell approximately between 900 items and products across different types of metals, aluminium, stainless steel, pewter, etc., and across the home, where a lot of people believe that we kind of sit in the dining and entertaining space. We have a number of items throughout the home and throughout living spaces, and a lot of iconic sculptural pieces that have been handcrafted and molded, underpinned by obviously really a high level of quality. We, as a company, are also committed to just kind of individual empowerment. So for those of you that know, we support a very big business called Monkey Biz. And the reason I mention this is because they are beaders that craft really amazing product, and also sit under the Carol Boys umbrella, who are also impacted by lockdown. We sit in the retail space. So from a lockdown perspective, this has really impacted us. We have 22 stores within South Africa, where within a week we had to close those down. We ship our products overseas. So from a supply chain perspective, we've had a knock-on effect, right, from the development of our product all the way through to delivery. Where we sit at the moment is that with those 22 stores that have closed, it has given us a massive opportunity to really think about the shift to digital. So, where it's always one of those buzzwords, shift to digital, changing your digital strategy. How do we get out of bricks and mortar? Or not how do we get out of bricks and mortar, but potentially how do we become more creative in our retail spaces? This has given us an opportunity to take a step back. So I feel for me, just as my role in the business and in the company at the moment, is that the shift to digital has impacted us with regards to the way that we are distributing product, and potentially not only now, but in the future. And also the way that we work as a company. We've really had to, galvanize around how our IT systems and processes work, with all of us working from home and just getting set up, actually, and getting set up properly. It's been an amazing testament to the team in terms of their collaborative effort. And then lastly, just one of the things in closing is, being in the retail space and seeing just the way this has impacted the world globally. From New York to Australia, wherever you go, with foot traffic at nothing and at zero, with malls having to do big closures. When we do come out of lockdown, it's really forced us within this time to think about how we can use our spaces more creatively. And I'll end there. So quite a lot in that. And I'll wait until some more Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you. And then third panelist we have is, as mentioned earlier, Jaco Hatting from Barloworld Logistics. Jaco is a general manager at the firm, and their focus is on logistics and supply chain. But Jaco, if you can do a similar thing and just intro a little bit about yourself, the business, what the high-level impact has been, to what extent your business might be operating as normal, and anything else you feel is relevant as an opening.
Thanks, Mervyn. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. I think Barloworld Logistics, for those that doesn't know, part of the Barloworld Group, which is comprised out of Barloworld Equipment, looking after Caterpillar, Barloworld Automotive, which is the Avis fleet services brands, and then obviously logistics. Our business is basically split into three divisions or areas: the transport side, the supply chain solutions side, which is predominantly warehousing and distribution, secondary distribution, and then the freight forwarding or global business, which is the side that's bringing the imports and exports, looking after that. So basically looking at end-to-end supply chain. Obviously technology a big drive for us as well. If we go back prior to COVID-19, the discussions and the buzzwords pretty much was fourth industrial revolution, those kind of personalization, experience, economy, all of those type of things. I don't really think it has changed that much. I think this has amplified this whole environment that we're in, and it's an opportunity for us to change, to really to almost like ignite some of those things that we were still wondering, what are we going to do? Are we going to put a business case together, try and figure out what's the business models and everything? We actually now need to actually start doing it, and I think that's the exciting part of what we are busy with, and the environment we're in. And by the way, Janine, I think my daughter will love that dollhouse in the background there.
How old is she, Jaco?
She's 5 years old, and my son is 9, or he's going 9, and we've got a bit of an open patch here. Yeah, playing in the mud, and but anyway, I'm helping myself there for a moment.
Well, mine is 8. You can borrow it for a while, but I need it back for my 9-month-old girl when she gets a bit older. Okay.
Jaco, just be careful, eh? All Janine's stores are closed, so she might sell you anything at the moment.
Any Carol boys in that house?
Okay, perfect.
So, I think just personally, I'm responsible for solution development in the supply chain solutions division. How it's impacted our team, I think it's been really positive, in a sense of, when it's almost like living close to the beach and never go to the sea, and now you almost like always part of your team, but you never really engage so directly with them the way that we've engaged over the last 4 or 5 weeks, and really brainstorming, coming up with solutions. I think maybe one of the examples around adoption of new technology is, had one of our members that was really struggling to get Zoom meetings organized. We've just recently moved into a new building. All the meeting rooms Zoom enabled and all of those lovely things. And that was about a year ago. And up until 5 weeks ago, everyone was still struggling. You know, the meetings would start and we would struggle to actually get going. And 5 weeks later, and everyone's, you know, really capable of doing Zoom, Teams, Skype, WebEx, you know, call it. Everyone is capable of doing that. And I think the example there is pretty much, you know, how quickly we really can adapt in times of let's call it a crisis. And I think this is a huge opportunity for us to really bring, you know, change and make those changes that we've always been talking about for the last couple of years around digitization and so forth. So, yeah, I think it's an exciting time. From a Barloworld logistics perspective, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we've been obviously impacted as well. The business on the essential side is really looking good, and the volumes are amazing. Some of the guys, the clients that we talk to and talk about, you know, reaching Black Friday type of volumes in certain cases. So definitely on the essential services side, the business is looking, it's a positive outlook. But we also have the automotive and the apparel type of retail industries that's really on shutdown. Janine, you would obviously sit in that space. So yeah, massive impact. And I think the big thing that we've realized, and I'm a retreaded operator. I come out of the operations, run some warehouses and stuff in the past. And, you know, those head office guys that come and do audits and, you know, BCM audits and all of those things, what a nightmare. And actually now that you look back, you say, you know, thanks for that, because at the end of the day, it actually gets a culture going of thinking differently, and it enables people to make decisions in crisis moments. And maybe an example in this space is one of our BCM principles is that the moment something, you know, like a tragedy would hit, you always start with an emergency response as a first portion of that. And that emergency response is, you know, is people's lives at stake? Firstly, and then secondly, am I looking after that? Is there anything impacting on assets? So that anyone in a business is actually been trained on this for years, and they actually know how to respond to that. So when this thing hit, a lot of our BCM plans was activated, and our warehouses and transport guys actually all responded in a very similar way. And I think one of your questions, Mervyn, was, you know, how does it, you know, impact on decision making? And I think this is where it really, you know, comes to light, where we're not only talking technology, we're talking processes and culture and how people are adapting to these things, and that's going to make us, you know, enable us to really, you know, react to these kind of situations. So I'm going into a lot of detail. I'm happy to spend.
No, that's great, Jaco. That's great.
That's pretty much an introduction side from my side, but, you know, open for conversation and questions.
Thank you so much. So you've actually mentioned a couple of things that are a nice segue into the first focus area of Q&A. If we talk about impact, right? One of the things is I've worked for a bootstrap startup before, where you can see when the money is going to run out, right? So the struggle that a lot of small businesses are going through right now, where they don't have clients, they can't get to their clients, and they were expecting on revenue this month to survive the next month. I fully understand that. You've also said that business continuity management has been something that you have been focusing on and that you invested in previously. What I'd like to understand from perhaps from Trevor and also from Janine is, you know, to what extent were you ready? To what extent have you been planning for, let's call it some downtime or outage? But also bearing in mind that what Trevor was saying is that their business is pretty much running as it was, with some changes in, let's say, operational procedures. That at the same time, we should bear in mind that there will be obvious things people are thinking about: cost, transparency, operational efficiency, trying to get rid of extra weight in terms of process and stock, and anything else that can make a business run a little bit more efficiently, right? So in terms of impact, Trevor, what are your thoughts there in terms of your readiness for something like this? As well as the, to what extent, I know you mentioned your business running as normal, but to what extent your operating procedures have had to adjust?
As I say, when I say it's running as normal, it's very much the new unnormal. But, yeah, just in terms of the operation, obviously, I think, as Jacques says, one goes through all of the audits and the business continuity and disaster recovery plans. And as I often say to particularly the auditors, when they do these things, is look, the real reality is often until you know the exact nature and scale of the event. Has one building burned down, or has a tsunami gone over the whole of your data center, or over a whole of production plant, until you actually know what the disaster you're dealing with. It's actually, you can only test scenarios. So I think, to come back to COVID, I think this is something that no one in the world has experienced. So it's unlike any sort of, let's call it BCP plan that people would have had. To Jaco's point, you can test it as much as you want, but you don't know until it really happens. So in that last week, from the day, obviously prior to that, we started getting ready around anticipating that, look, we didn't know where this was going to go, but we're going to have to keep running because we produce food for the nation. And so prior to the week after, before Cyril announced the shutdown, the lockdown, before the president also closed the schools, we'd already started thinking about if we had to start working remotely. That was one point. And then the second one, from an operation point of view, we were thinking about what are the implications. So I think an important point is, given once we knew the situation and we knew we were going into a lockdown, our first objective was about people's safety and actually making sure that we could ensure people's safety coming to work, because we needed at least 15, 20,000 people that had to actually go to work. And then obviously we actually tried to work out how we could separate shifts. And in some places we even changed from 2 12-hour shifts to 3 8-hour shifts, so we could actually have smaller teams at, let's say, a production plant in Rustenburg. So there was a huge amount of operational planning, and all of it was around how we could actually first ensure that our employees were safe, and then secondly, ensure that we could continue operating in these very abnormal times. So yeah, I think we were, the speed at which we had to get ready in those last 2 weeks prior, we had a lot of different VC facilities being used, but essentially we did a very fast, we rolled out about 2,500 Teams licenses literally in that week before the lockdown, mainly because we had a lot of Skype, we had Skype for Business, and the extent to which we've got about 2,500 people that are working remotely, like me, our whole exec team, a lot of the senior management. So it really was, those are some of the things that, while the whole team's rollout was on our plan for later this year, it actually happened in 3 days. So it's actually incredible. Things can mobilize, even if it wasn't in your immediate plans. So yeah, I think that safety has been the first thing. The challenge we've had have been everything from, which I'm sure Jaco would have experienced, from if you are operating, you're dealing with trying to get 20,000 people to work. So it's liaising with taxi companies, with bus companies, with managing social distancing, say shift changes. And what's been incredible is how the people within our organization, and I'm talking about shop floor, actually truly embraced. And I think the whole motto for them was around, they're doing this for the nation. And I have to say, has been the most incredible thing to witness. And again, I'm talking the shop floor. We go right through to merchandising, delivery and merchandising. So we also pack product onto the shelves in a pick and pay shop right in Asmart. So yeah, we've had some incredible videos that have actually been sent back by staff, singing, from singing the anthem to saying, we at work so you can stay at home. So it's really been an incredible time of true nation building, but even nation building within our company. So yeah, and then the last point is, today at 2:00 we're actually having a national video conference using in fact a YouTube/Zoom facility, where we've invited every single person from the company, and the whole exec team will be literally talking and answering questions, a bit like we're doing now, except potentially we're probably expecting about 1,000 people on the call. So yeah, those are the things we're trying to do to keep the the momentum and people's motivation up. The one thing that I think we couldn't plan for, and that's what's happening every day, is just to give you a small example. Obviously, there's been a lot of stuff in the press you would have seen on hot food being sold in delis, or the Nando's and Chicken Lickens and the KFCs being closed. To give you an idea of the scale, we sell about 1.5 million chickens a week into the KFCs, the Nando's, the Chicken Lickens. So again, that's something you can't plan for, that every single one of your quick service restaurants are closed. And suddenly, more than 40% of our production has had to find another place to go. So you can't stop birds growing. So chickens are being produced every week based on the cycle. And I think those are the things, Mervyn, at where operationally the team has been grappling every day with changing product mixes. It's way beyond anyone could have imagined, because it's literally every day there's a new challenge.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, the minister could announce that they're going to open up the QSRs, that being quick service restaurants, and our whole business production mix will pivot back to what we normally make. So yeah, it's literally by the day things are changing.
Yeah. Exactly.
Trevor, maybe a thought is you can sell those chickens with the recipe, and we can then start buying it again.
Sorry, sell them with?
You can sell them with the recipe, and then we'll just continue making it at home.
Yeah, and well, look, they are being sold. So if you go to your friendly retailer store, you can get them. I think the one other thing, Mervyn, which I think is very important to mention, because I feel as passionate, if not more passionate about it, is we've also, and it's an independent organization, and please go and look at the website. I'll circulate the LinkedIn and the Facebook and the Instagram social media on it. We've got a Do More Foundation, which we actually also got started right at the beginning of lockdown, which is a foundation which basically gets food to the vulnerable. So even, to be honest, even before the government started talking about, or everyone started talking about the next crisis, which is going to be people going hungry, we've actually redirected and set up extended the logistics of enabling all of our partners, so people like SA Food, Food Bank, Food Forward, Gift to the Givers. So we started leveraging up collection of funds and product, so we could allow them to scale up. So yeah, I think at the moment we've hit something like 1 million meals already that have been provided through our partners. So I think we've been very cognizant of, it's great for those that are actually working and have money in their pockets, but the bulk of our population actually doesn't have money in their pockets, and the bulk of the informal population that did have jobs before are now unemployed and don't have money. So it's great if you've got money, you can buy chicken, obviously. But if you don't have money, you're relying on some social cause. So that's something I must say we've thrown a lot of energy. So it's actually amazing. There's two streams of what we do.
Yeah. And actually, there's a comment on the chat here from Chris Short at Pick and Pay, just saying that he agrees with you on the staffing side. They've had to have the same galvanizing behind the mission to feed the nation. So there is a question I want to raise later, which is around what your outlook is. So Janine, just on readiness, you described Carol Boys as a small company. I think if you look at the footprint of retail outlets around the world and the online presence, you could argue that it's not such a small business. But
no, it's not small. It's not small in the state of small in terms of revenue. Yeah, definitely medium-sized. Company.
So, how would you say to what extent the business was ready for something like this? I know that your background is in FMCG, engineering, and banking as well. So, any thoughts on either corporate or personal readiness to tackle something like this?
Yeah, I think if anything, probably from a business continuity perspective, where I've probably learned the most is working for a bank through the recession, right? If anything, from a financial services perspective, it's one of the places that can't go under, right? You need to operate. People need their money. And so from a BCM perspective in banking, the systems and procedures, Barclays in the UK, I was there for more than a decade, really sets you up as a senior leader to understand the various processes, disaster recovery, business continuity management, and principles you need to have in place. At Carol Boys on the board, I guess to Trevor's point, you're never really ready for this, right? When people talk about business continuity, you imagine yourself in the building dealing with external disaster, right? That might potentially affect you but that you can shape in some size or form. So you can kind of put a number to it, you can put a volume to it, you can put an impact to it. With Corona, I think we were all kind of a little bit stumped, right? Because it had hit China, it had gone through Europe. We knew that it was coming to some degree. We knew that it was going to impact us, but you didn't really know when that was going to happen. So in a way, I feel like we were prepared and we could replicate what other countries and companies were doing. But I feel like what we did was we galvanized around the immediate setup of our business outside. And for us, part of that was very easy. So part of it was taking head office and moving them to their homes, which actually was quite easy because everybody's got laptops and they're easy to, to move space. It's easy to move those people. We then have a retail store team where we have really had to think about how, we can utilize those individuals in times like this. And obviously a little bit harder to get them to work based on what their kind of day-to-day jobs are. And then I've got a product development team where, if there's one thing I could say in setup for going forward, it's one of the areas that's very hard to replicate is a workshop. Okay, Carol Boys is we design, we touch, we create, and we craft our product. So we take a design and we put it into a mold, we put it into resin, we sculpt it in a workshop, we send it off, we bring it back, we use sandpaper. It's not something that we kind of ship off and then get back. So for our product development team in our art department, that was actually a lot more challenging. So in terms of readiness, I'd probably say getting us set up outside was relatively easy, and that we could do, like Trevor said, within a couple of days and get people at home. The hard part was thinking about the processes that we couldn't replicate, the ones where we need people and hands and specific access to machinery. And that is definitely something that we have, got to lay the foundation for going forward. We've never really had to think about big workshops in that capacity in people's homes or garages. Saying that we did ship a lot of people off with a lot of product, and so they are sitting at home with their own sandpaper trying to get some progress in some of those things. With regards to operational procedures, Mervyn, you spoke about, I just want to mention two things basically. One is this kind of digital first strategy, which we've spoken about, but not just digital first in terms of digital and sales, but actually digital in terms of paperless procedures. So we still rely heavily in our back end on a lot of paper signing, moving paper around. We're not at the point where we've got all of our processes from a financial perspective. That's not in a kind of, full end-to-end digital process. And it's been amazing. Jaco, like you said, when you're forced to do it, right, you just end up getting it done. And that's what we've had to do is actually, it's very easy. We found it very easy to go, actually, but there's this app, you can do it. And so I've kind of come into the business wanting to spearhead this. And now we're getting a lot of people coming up with those ideas themselves. And then the other one is just collaboration I wanted to mention. As a marketing company and one where we've got to think about campaigns, a lot of our ideation happens on the side of a desk in a room. We've got pieces of paper, we ideate, we brainstorm, we draw things, we do photography, we do shoots, we rely on people coming into the business and taking our product and making it look beautiful. That's been quite challenging. People being away from the business and then having to go into archives and thinking about how we can really refresh, bring things back, challenge ourselves to say, actually, we do have the collateral. How do we make sure we can make it work for us again, and think about how we rely on those people who can potentially just, with great graphic design. And then probably something that I'm sure Jaco and Trevor can relate to is just more communication and being really empathetic as a leader. I'm sitting at home, I've got 4 children. I've got, lots of staff who are having to do the same and having to potentially just be a little bit more mindful and acknowledge the fact that a lot of our staff are in exactly the same boat, right? So productivity, as much as we think it can be up here and we've got more time because we're not traveling, actually people are having to juggle. And as the board, we've been very mindful of this, so don't have 2-hour meetings, ask people about what works for them. Potentially I've gone, guys, actually after I put the kids to bed, it works for me. And I've seen so many people put their hands up and go, actually, Janine, if we can do it after 7:30, if you've got an hour, then I'd much prefer that than 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I feel like our working day has had to shift. We've had to yeah, just think about that a lot more, and actually just be open in our communications and tell people that, and go, guys, we know you're struggling. We know that the juggle is real, and that, I think, has really resonated with a lot of individuals. And I think it's very important as organizations through times like this that we can be mindful of that. Yeah, that's me.
Great, thanks, Janine. Jaco, maybe a question to yourself just regarding decision making and the speed thereof. I think in a lot of organizations, there are fundamental decisions that have been made at board level and at the C-suite around strategy and procedures and policies and the like. This obviously has shifted that into a split second, or maybe not a split second, but a decision process or decision making process that has to be within a couple of hours, maybe day tops. How have you been able to do that within your organization, getting consensus at the highest level, and getting those decisions made and getting that information down into the execution layer? Let's call it that.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Colin. I think it's a good question. I want to go back to what Trevor said earlier. They're having a company-wide meeting this afternoon. I think there's something that we've done quite successfully on our side as well, is where the guys would meet, come up with a strategy, and then in one go communicate it to the entire organization. So I think we've had two major, where more than 1,000 people, I think, also, would just log on to a web broadcast, and then I think also back to what Janine said, is the importance of communication and clear communication and direction on this is where we are, and these are the kind of decisions we have to make in the next 3, 6 or whatever weeks, not months even, is going to be important. So even sometimes those messages are not an easy message to share, and I think it's probably the most difficult time for an exec team to share messages. But it is really important to make sure that staff is clear on what to expect, so they can actually start dealing with the consequences of that. And I think that's the most important thing. So good, clear direction from senior management, very important. And then I want to go back to the other comment where we were talking about trust and making sure that we've got our employees able to know where, it's almost like they're empowered to make decisions on their own at certain levels. And that's, I think, where good business continuity plans, really kicks in and enable people to say, I can, within my operation, I can make certain decisions, and I will not, because of the principles and the values of a company, I know that if I make those decisions, even if I make a mistake, maybe, if it's still aligned to those values and principles, I could still, make that and move forward. We are all going to make mistakes in these times, but the importance of having employees feel empowered and able to make those decisions, I think, is the second level of keeping the operation going. And then the strategy stuff from the exec is as critical. So I don't know if that answers, but pretty much those are the two main areas of focus.
Thanks, Jaco. I was hoping we could chat briefly about products, specifically an outlook to sustainability or longevity of the products that you offer. Okay, so Jaco, in the supply chain, and I'm actually going to ask each of you, but in the supply chain and logistics space, something to consider is, what's the potential impact to the use of drones as a competitor to what you're doing? Trevor, I know that there's been some recent info in the media about RCL Foods' involvement with Live Kindly. So maybe you can share something on. I think it was at the Gartner conference we spoke at length about the future of chicken and sugar, but perhaps you can share some insight there. And then Janine as well, in terms of what your outlook is for, let's call it the high quality functional art space going forward. So Jaco, to you first.
Yeah, I think I can start. I think drones is still a big question mark, and the ability of drones and the distance that it can go. And we've been exploring with drones inside facilities around inventory optimization, inventory counting, and those type of things. So I think drones is still a bit of there's still a bit of development that needs to go into drones. But I do think technology in itself is going to play a critical role. And maybe if I can just step off the drone subject a moment and understand supply chain technologies, the importance of being able to do scenario planning in events like this, and having a visibility of your supply chain, and I think big data and the data warehouses and all of those type of things, I think that's going to be the component that's really being amplified now, where you really have visibility end to end, and you can actually run certain scenarios and plan for events like this. Not that it's going to come every day, but there is the continuous ability for us to then scenario test certain events, like we've done with BCMs inside operations. This is at a planning level or more at a tactical strategic level. The importance of having that, and I think it again goes back to what I said earlier. The technology is one portion of that, but and I'm going to give you an example. So when we started looking at our business intelligence, we all we put our platforms in place, and we build the data warehouses and everything, and then halfway through you realize, but half the data that you require doesn't exist, and then you first realize, like, I need to now go and build the data first, and then in order to build that data, I need to bring people and process together. And so digitization and the way we were going, it is so important to always think about this thing as technology is an enabler to a process. Drones is going to be an enabler to a certain process. It's not necessarily going to just replace a person or a specific function. Maybe we now need people to actually operate those drones. I've had a look at those locus robotics and assisting robotics assisting people in getting their jobs done better. And I think the main message I would like to leave with this thought is, when we digitize, we are enabling people to do jobs above what they are currently doing. So you're actually making people more productive. And I think that's some of the things that we need to start thinking of into the future, is to say, how are we going to evolve and get people to adopt to new ways of working, working from home, working inside an operation, inside a warehouse, and enable them to actually do a job far above what that you expect them to do. And that is the business processes that you would bring in. In the old story that we've been talking about, OE and continuous improvement and all of those things, I think the criticality of making that part of a culture, and then make people think differently, think systematically, and then enable them through technology like drones, if you could, or even just operating systems to help them do a job way above an average person. And I think that's something that, if we get it right, we can really become competitive as a country in the world, and hopefully also help people in the process. So I know I've diverged a bit from your drone question, but I think it's a much bigger question around technology and enabling people.
Thanks, Jaco. Trevor, did you want to just quickly mention something about the Live Kindly initiative?
Yes, yeah, very exciting. So obviously we well, probably now the third biggest after imported cheap chicken from Brazil, but that we one of the major, Astral and ourselves, are the major chicken producers in South Africa. So it can seem quite strange that one of the future competitors of animal protein will obviously be plant-based protein or lab-grown protein. So we've actually partnered as the Africa partner with a company called Live Kindly, which has been launched globally. It was launched in New York on the 10th of March. I got out of New York literally the day Trump was banning all flights into New York. So it was a close shave, but so I'm in week 6 of isolation, because I came back. I had 2 weeks of self-isolation after New York, and then went straight into I think what's it now, 4th or 5th week, I don't even know, 4th week of lockdown. So it's actually been interesting. So I haven't been to the office for 6 weeks.
Day 2,500, Trevor.
It's quite incredible how busy one is. But so to come back to that, so we were looking at this actually in November already. The launch of the product happened in the first week of March. The reality is COVID hadn't quite hit the rest of the world at that stage. Everyone, when I was in New York, everyone was happy and celebrating, and the whole of New York was operating as normal. It literally changed that week. So I think on a positive end, in some ways, this has given even more life to the Live Kindly. And if you do a Google search on Live Kindly, you'll find a lot of media about it and some videos of the launch. But essentially, it's going to be a global plant-based and ultimately any alternate protein. And it'll be in every continent. And essentially, they're doing something fairly unique in that they've selected a major, interestingly enough, selecting major protein-based companies, because ultimately it's about getting the product to market. So, if you want to sell alternate protein nuggets to KFC, who better to talk to than the people who supply all the chicken nuggets to KFC? So it's about scaling rapidly globally. So it's you might have heard of Fryers. That's one of the South African-born vegetarian alternate protein product that was started by the Wally Fry, the Fry's family, in 1991. So it's actually been around 29 years. He obviously had some vision, because he did it long before the rest of the world started talking about plant-based protein. Live Kindly's actually acquired Fry's, so that's our wholly owned entity now. And ultimately, it'll all be part of the Africa JV that we're working on at the moment. But they've also acquired a company called Light Meat, which makes, and that's in Germany, which you literally can break up the nugget, let's say, and it looks like chicken fiber, chicken muscle, but it's plant. And so it's incredible innovation. They're looking at, or we, because I'm part of it, looking at some major players in the US. So that's the intention is to launch by the end of this year. And that'll be, again, partnering with some of the major multi-billion-dollar companies. So the same is going to happen in Asia and China. So over the next 2-3 years, something that was in March a startup with a $200 million fundraise, founders range. So RCR Foods was part of the founders range of investors. There was a selected group of companies that were invited and investors. And this is absolutely exciting. It did start before COVID, but I think it's an example of you actually have to, it's a good old, why didn't Marriott start Airbnb? And they didn't, because their business was building hotels and managing hotels. And in our case, why did we get in plant-based protein? Is because we believe that in the future there will be animal-based protein, but there will also be a major market for plant-based, not because of vegans and vegetarians, but because we need protein that's more affordable for the masses. So for Africa, it's a huge opportunity where people live on carbohydrate diets, and the future could be a meal in a bottle. It's hugely exciting. I'm involved globally in the entity. We're actually currently trying to set up a global spine. We're negotiating, discussing with SAP. I had a call last night. So with SAP US, because it will be head office out of New York. So it's hugely exciting. And in some ways, it was pre-COVID, but it's the exact type of response that I think companies need to be doing. It's challenging your current business, but potentially building a whole new segment to your new business.
Yeah.
So Mervyn, very exciting. Maybe just one comment I want to make. There's been a few chats that have come up, questions. I have just been banging away answering a few questions in the chat box. But the one question that did come up was around, will people go back and, will management, how does one work in the future post-COVID? I can tell you that, at 10:30 today, we have a board or exec with our CEO every single day at 10:30. I could comfortably say that we have spoken to each other more in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks than we have spoken in the last 3 years, because we obviously have our monthly exec meetings. We have maybe a bi-weekly exec chat session. We have a 1.5 hour Zoom or Teams call every single day. So that's why I can comfortably talk what's happening in Rustenburg this morning or yesterday. The same with Omar Russ or Maiden Maltino. It's an incredible high. And do I think it'll go back to anything different? I think we've all discovered a whole new way. I think the companies that embrace it will be the ones that will truly make a huge difference. And the reality is people start questioning, who do they need in an organization, and do they need a head office? And obviously you still need operations, but I think from a management and let's call it the staff, specialist staff base of work, it's actually so much more creative and so much more mobile. And as Janine was saying, people can flex their work days. Last night I think we were on a call till 7 or 8 o'clock at night with New York, and it just makes it all possible because, and then at 3 o'clock I had a little chill out in the sun with a cup of coffee. So it truly is a new world, and I think that's where we're going. And it's those companies that can't embrace it, I think, will be left behind.
Yeah. No, good. Thank you, Theo. There are a couple of questions. I'm looking at the clock. I'd like to suggest that where there are questions that haven't been answered yet, we will try to get some comment from the panelists and share that post the webinar. Janine, perhaps a closing comment from you in terms of outlook for the industry sector, the type of products or services, where there may be opportunities for innovation that you're thinking of right now.
Well, in a minute, I can definitely say, we're lucky at Carol Boys that our designs and our product is timeless. So, if you buy one of our products, it's there. If you make one of them, it doesn't go stale in a warehouse, which is amazing. I'd probably say a big focus for us coming out of this is really relooking our supply chain and kind of what minimum order quantity actually looks like. I think made to order and customizable and more curated pieces, I think, are going to become more of the norm. From a sustainability perspective, we have always, and we'll be focusing more on, I think, pushing ourselves into look at things like sustainable packaging and what that means for our business going forward. But ultimately, I'm going to come back to it. It's just like, I think this situation has forced us to really go digital. So I'm just really excited. The fact that we've, been able to show ourselves that our customers still love us during this time. So yeah, that's me in terms of closing. Nothing else to add on that, Mervyn.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to say I'd like to offer a virtual round of applause to our panelists. Thank you very much for making some time available this morning. That's us giving you a virtual round of applause in this case. Really appreciate your insights, and it seems like the comments or the Q&A that have come through is also reinforcing that notion that in times that are tough like this, we probably just need to start talking. Where we're comfortable sharing experiences, where we're comfortable sharing lessons learned, we just need to start talking and having a bit more open collaboration to understand where some opportunities might exist. What I'd like to share is, very briefly, Colin and I form part of a team. I think one of our colleagues described as being a team of innovation practitioners that live in the future, that occasionally come back to the present to help CXOs put their, confirm their place in a digital future. And we've been very actively involved in looking at how businesses or industries can react and recover and reinvent themselves during this pandemic situation. And in doing so, we've also made certain solutions available free of charge over the course of the pandemic of a certain period. Two of the key ones that came up that might be useful for people on the call. One is to overcome broken supply chains. And this is our Ariba Discovery platform, which is designed to connect suppliers and buyers. And the idea with this is that you can log into the Ariba platform as a buyer and try to find suitable suppliers to cater for a product that you might not be able to source from your traditional means, given the international lockdowns that we're facing right now. And one of the examples that was really, really amazing is a construction company in the US that needed to fulfill on a 500 hospital bed order and was able to do this in 30 minutes using an alternate supplier through that platform. So that's still available. If that's something that might benefit your organization, go and have a look at it. Like I said, it's still free of charge within that 90-day period. The other one, there was a question from Zimkita on the chat around the mental well-being of employees. And one of the solutions that we've made available is our Employee Pulse survey, where you can check in with people, not to find out the detail, but just to find out how they're doing and where there might be opportunities to improve the basics that they need to be functional. What this also has is relevant dashboards built in so that you can see how employees are responding to their new working environment, as well as look at some of the text using artificial intelligence to understand a bit more behind what they are saying, or more importantly, what they're not saying. And what we realized is that when this was announced, there was a massive uptake. I think it's about 7,600 companies of different sizes globally that are using the SAP Qualtrics Employee Pulse survey. And there were three key things that they realized that the employees needed. Number one is a dedicated workspace, right, from home. Number two is the technology for them to connect. And we've talked about Teams and Zoom and all these other platforms that you've had to roll out in your respective businesses. And most importantly, a definition of what success looks like. I know that internally I've had that discussion as well, but essentially trying to confirm with management, what are we trying to say is a successful working day or working week? So if these are tools that might be beneficial, I encourage you to go to sap.com, scroll down just slightly, and we'll have a page there saying in times of crisis, people come first. If you click on access tools and resources, there's a page with a number of other platforms that would be relevant for this type of context as well. So just a quick reminder, sessions that we're planning to set up. One is business continuity in East Africa. If that's of interest to you, please do respond when we send out some communication about it. And then we are in the conceptualization phase of an ideation workshop to look at how we rebuild South Africa. And that will take different perspectives, from tech to economics to the people side to looking at startups and various other initiatives. Again, if that's something of interest. And then looking at what your future of work readiness is. Obviously, the future of work we have right now is very different to the future of work we thought about in December or Jan. My argument is that the future of work is actually the current of work. But yeah, we've got a workshop plan to help people understand what their level of readiness would be like going forward. So that's it. One last question for the panel. I'm sure that people might have some follow-up questions. Are you okay with anybody reaching out to you through LinkedIn or some other channel if there are any follow-up discussions they'd like to have? Yes? Yes?
Absolutely fine.
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect.
Maybe Mervyn, just one other comment from me, which I was going to say it earlier, but I mean, I know Mervyn, myself, and him might be a few other people on the call that are actively involved on the Open EXO, which is Exponential Organizations. Both of us are ambassadors on that program. But it's just something, again, interesting. It all ties to what Mervyn's spoken about. It's just about how do you help your organization become exponential, and all the principles we talk to. It's about staff on demand, leveraging assets, and I think it's actually, it's an amazing playbook for how you can actually leverage, and it talks very much about these type of things. So exactly. I just thought, Mervyn, that was worth mentioning just to assist, I think, everyone out there.
Good. Thanks, Trevor. Thank you. Okay, so to the panelists, thank you again to Trevor, Yaku, and Janine. Have a great day. Good luck with whichever exec meeting you are stepping into right now. Sorry for making you a few minutes late getting into that next meeting. From Colin and myself, thank you so much for joining. We'll share details about future events at the Suit.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.